The law of surprise. There is no better allegory to describe the violent nature of the human race and our continued vain attempts at assuming mastery over nature and destiny and harnessing that power that we gained in using it for our own devices. It's as old as humanity itself, this ancient custom that entails that when a person owes a great debt to another, a debt so vast that the mere offering of coin or gold can't hope to repay it, the person who is in debt can offer his savior anything he or she wants, to which the holder of the debt may invoke the law of surprise. Give me whatever you left at home without knowing, or alternatively, give me what you find at home that you did not expect to find. But the simplest way of putting it would be give me that what you have but don't know yet. In its core, it is an offering of an unknown, mysterious nature that evokes the primal instinct to explore the unknown. It is given from one person to the other as a sign of the utmost gratitude that can't be described with words and can't be measured in the material. That what is given here is the most a man can humanly muster, the chance to change both of their destinies for better or worse. The reward can be anything, a pair of new leather boots fresh from the shop, or a shiny set of plate mail that a wife commissioned for her husband, but the reward can also be of a less material nature. The human belief in the power of destiny is so enrooted in our collective consciousness that the law of surprise extends even to living things. A cat that snuck its way into the barn seeking warmth, or a relative that just happened to stop by. But what most invokers hope to receive as reward is a so-called child surprise. A child that is conceived or born without the father's knowledge does fall under the law of surprise. This occurrence is surprisingly common for such an unlikely event that the only explanation for this course of event is that destiny has woven a new string in the tapestry of time, and that these children are specially marked by destiny, but it's not as simple as it sounds. There is a custom stating that destiny must have time to work its mystical power, meaning that only when the child surprise agrees to go with the invoker can the invoker make his claim. It can be 5, 10, or even in some cases 15 years before the owner came to collect the debt and the child agreed to leave with him. But again, humans are superstitious by nature, so in most cases the knowledge that destiny had it that the child falls under the law of surprise is enough for them to blindly follow suit, look the other way, and surrender their child to a stranger and whatever future awaits them in their new life. It is convenient then, this blind belief in the power of destiny most common folk seem to share, for the sort of people who invoke the law of surprise most frequently are witchers, looking to supplement their ranks with fresh recruits. It is common belief that child surprises, which are marked by destiny, have a better than average chance of surviving the uncertainty of witcher training. So witchers who are offered anything they want as compensation for their work must always ask for the offer to be repeated twice before they can invoke the law of surprise. But the times where a witcher would often invoke the law of surprise are long past. There are no young witchers training at Kaer Morhen for a simple reason. There is no one to train them. Before the events of the book take place, while our moody hero was still a young witcher fresh on the pad, a mob of fanatics driven by hate launched a siege on Kaer Morhen. The origin of this hate can be traced to a book written by an unknown author called Monstrum, or Portrayal of Witchers. This book was most likely a part of a larger operation whose goal was to rid the world of the Witchers, for the information it contained was wildly inaccurate. It portrays the Witchers as vile, hideous monsters, contrary to nature, born of sorcery and devilry, and paints the witchering profession as an affront to the gods and a blasphemous evil scam to steal from the honest, hard-working peasants. With the help of an unknown group of mages, without whom the angry mob would have never broken through the outer walls of the keep, the assault was a success. Kaer Morhen was reduced to a broken ruin it is today, and all the Witcher present were slaughtered without remorse. A few Witchers did survive, a mere handful of them, for they were away when the purge happened, but the number of survivors didn't really matter. The finer secrets of the Witcher training died with the elder Witchers who perished at Kaer Morhen. The knowledge needed to mix the various concoctions used in the trial of grasses was lost. and the only elder witcher that survived was Vesemir, who was only a fencing instructor, a good one at that, but still only a fencing instructor. Whoever orchestrated this whole assault ultimately achieved his goal. There will never again be apprentice witchers in Kaer Morhen, and when the few who survived finally perish, with them ends the era of witchers. The reason why I spent the first half of the video explaining all of this is so you can understand why it's so nonsensical and utterly uncharacteristic of Geralt to invoke the law of surprise not once, but 2 times, both of which came well after the sack of Kaer Morhen. For some reason that is unknown to me, Geralt decided to throw a wrench in the clockwork of destiny, and in doing so he changed his own future and influenced the world in ways he really couldn't have predicted. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Geralt's first instance of playing into Destiny's hands was at the court of Queen Chalante, the Queen of Cintra, better known by her nickname the Lioness of Cintra. At first, the beautiful queen refused to reveal to Geralt the details of the proposed contract, even going as far and insisting from Geralt he uses an alias for the feast she invited him to. He was provided with a fake name accompanied by an equally fake crest sewn to his noble doublet. The occasion for the said feast was gathering aspiring suitors for the queen's daughter, the equally beautiful Princess Pavetta, and finally choosing her future husband. Naturally enough, Geralt was not pleased with this turn of events. He didn't like working for royalty, for they often mistake a witcher for a hired thug, a man-killer for hire, and especially when the conditions of his contract were being kept from him. To further illustrate Geralt's displeasure, let me read an excerpt from The Last Wish. For context's sake, know that Geralt made a few too many snide remarks on why he was summoned to court, and the queen, voicing her displeasure via subtle threat, implied that everyone has a price and he need only to name his. Geralt responded in the only manner he knew how, with a history lesson dripping with sarcasm and not so subtle threats. "Ah, Geralt," said Chalante, with a gesture forbidding a servant from refilling her goblet. "I speak and you remain silent. We're at a feast, we all want to enjoy ourselves. Amuse me. I'm starting to miss your pertinent remarks and perceptive comments. I'd also be pleased to hear a compliment or two, homage or assurance of your obedience, in whichever order you choose." "Oh well, your majesty," said the witcher. "I'm not a very interesting dinner companion. I'm amazed to be singled out for the honor of occupying this place. Indeed, somewhere far more appropriate should have been seated here. Anyone you wished, it would have sufficed for you to give them the order or to buy them. It's only a question of price." Go on, go on." Chalante tilted her head back and closed her eyes, the semblance of a pleasant smile on her lips. "So I'm honored and proud to be sitting by Queen Chalante of Cintra, whose beauty is surpassed only by her wisdom. I also regard it as an honor that the queen has heard of me and that, on the basis of what she has heard, does not wish to use me for trivial matters. Last winter, Prince Horbarik, not being so gracious, tried to hire me to find a beauty, sick of his vulgar advances, had fled the ball, losing a slipper. It was difficult to convince him that he needed a huntsman and not a witcher." The queen was listening with an enigmatic smile. "Other rulers too, unequal in your wisdom, didn't refrain from proposing trivial tasks. It was usually a question of murder, a stepson, stepfather, stepmother, uncle, aunt. It's hard to mention them all. They were all of the opinion that it was simply a question of price." The queen's smile could have meant anything. "And so I repeat," Geralt bowed his head a little, "that I cannot contain my pride sitting next to you, ma'am. And pride means a very great deal to us witchers. You wouldn't believe how much. A lord once offended the witcher's pride by proposing a job that wasn't in the keeping with either honor or the witcher's code. What's more, he didn't accept a polite refusal and wished to prevent the witcher from leaving his castle. Afterwards, everyone agreed this wasn't one of his best ideas." "Geralt," said Chalante after a moment's silence, "you're wrong. You're a very interesting dinner companion." After some more back and forth, the queen finally clued in the witcher on his task. He was to assure that the Queen's planned alliance with Skellige is secured, and the marriage of Princess Pavetta was to form the backbone of that alliance. The Queen was not interested in which manner the Witcher accomplishes his tasks, only the results were important, and Geralt only agreed to take up this task after the Queen uttered the magic words twice. "I will give you whatever you ask for," despite still not being sure what awaits him. And what awaited him was a literal fight with destiny, or at least that's what the Queen imagined it would take to ensure the alliance. I don't want to go into many details on this one, for this story really deserves a dedicated video of its own, so just know that with the help of the druid mage Mousak, Geralt reversed the curse, fought off several guards and distinguished guests, but in the end he managed to secure the alliance between Sintra and Skellige. After the dust had finally settled, 2 marriages were on their way and a promise had to be kept. From the beautiful Queen Chalante, Geralt requested only a green sash Her Majesty worn, but another contender came up and gave the Witcher a chance to play with destiny. Urcheon of Edelnwold, known as Duny, the love of Princess Pavetta and her future husband, urged Geralt to name his price as compensation for lifting a horrible, terrible curse that gripped him. "Duny," said Geralt seriously, "Chalante, Pavetta, and you, righteous knight Tershak, future king of Sintra. In order to become a Witcher, you have to be born in the shadow of destiny, and very few are born like that. That's why there's so few of us. We're growing old, dying, without anyone to pass our knowledge, our gifts onto. We lack successors, and this world is full of evil which awaits for the day none of us are left." "Geralt," whispered Chalante. "Yes, you're not wrong, Queen. Duny, you will give me that which you already have but do not know. I'll return to Sintra in 6 years to see if destiny has been kind to me." What momentary madness consumed Geralt that he invoked the law of surprise, despite knowing that even if the boy was to be born, he would have never been a full-fledged Witcher, I can't say with certainty. Maybe it was Geralt's way of extracting some poetic justice, being forced to yet again meddle in the affairs of human and human royalty at that, mostly against his will, or maybe seeing the lengths Duny was willing to go for his loved one somehow cracked the icy prison surrounding his heart and he wished an offspring of his own, but this second possibility is highly, extremely unlikely. I'm inclined to believe that this was a spur-of-the-moment thing, a moment where he couldn't control his inner cynical asshole and he decided to serve some cold revenge for so blatantly being treated like a tool and not a real person. But in the end, it doesn't matter, for 6 years later, when the time came for Geralt to collect, he refused his prize. During the 6 long years that Geralt waited, he had time to contemplate his decision, and came to the conclusion that he does not want to take on the responsibility he so recklessly burdened himself with. Upon his return to Sintra, Geralt was greeted by an obviously angry Chalante, but she had nothing to fear, for Geralt refused his child's surprise and any other offers Chalante thrown at him, walking away from his destiny for the first time. The second time Geralt walked away from his destiny came shortly after he first unknowingly met his child's surprise. During a diplomatic mission to the dry-held Brokilon forest, Geralt saved a little girl from a giant centipede monster-type thingy. After some convincing and not so subtle threats that involved a belt and the girl's behind, it was revealed to him that the child was called Ciri, a princess from an undisclosed land that was running away from an unwanted marriage. The two didn't hit it off at first, but as they spent more time together, Geralt's softer side seemed to emerge, and soon enough they formed a relationship that bordered on friendship. The child was obviously lost in the forest of Brokilon, which meant that she is to be taken to Duen Canel, the heart of Brokilon, when Lady Ep3, the governess of these lands, resides. As they traveled further, Ciri revealed a bit more about herself, amongst which was the fact that her parents, which were obviously Duny and Princess Pavetta, perished when their ship was lost in a colossal storm at sea. But the most important piece of information the little princess was willing to disclose was that in confidence her nanny told her that she was destined for a certain Witcher, and that her grandma, a beautiful queen, won't let anyone take her away. Soon enough, the unlikely duo reached their destination, the heart of Brokilon, Duen Canel, and there the little oblivious Ciri understood that Geralt was a Witcher, that he was the Witcher, and what exactly coming to the heart of Brokilon meant for little girls like Ciri. She was to become one of the Dryads. The sacred waters of Brokilon will make her forget about her past, and in time she will not remember who Cirilla was, but destiny had other plans. After all, Ciri was a child of elder blood, and Geralt of Rivia, the Butcher of Blaviken, was her fate. The waters of Brokilon, ancient and powerful, had no effect on Cirilla, and the Fair Queen sent them on their way, Cirilla clutching to Geralt as she finally found her destiny. But Geralt had other plans. After learning of Ciri's parentage and who she really was, Geralt once again decided to flee, leaving her in the care of Druid Mousesack and turning his back to destiny once again. In the following years, Geralt roamed the countryside, doing what he does best, killing monsters and other Witcher stuff, but the world was not so content with lazy monotony and things were changing. A black swarm approached from the south, and the First Northern War has started. The legions of the Empire of Nilfgaard were marching north, burning castles and villages as they advanced, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind them until they were finally pushed back at the Battle of Sodden Hill by the combined forces of the Northern Coalition, but not before the Black Legion razed Sintra to the ground, the home of Queen Shalante and Ciri, leaving it a burning ruin. The news of Sintra's fall and the rumors surrounding the fate of Ciri came as a shock for Geralt, for he was on his way to Sintra. Presumably he has changed his mind and he was ready to accept his fate and that Ciri was his destiny. The bearer of these news was one of Geralt's only friends, the famous poet Dandelion, whom Geralt met when he was on the southern side of the Urga River. The poet, in his usual cowardly style, was fleeing from the advancing Nilfgaardian horde. Geralt seemingly accepted the news of Sintra's fall with absolute indifference, stating that destiny is not enough, something more is needed, but what? He will never find out. He thought his whole episode with destiny was over, but no matter what he said and the sadic way he responded to the possibility of Ciri's death, his actions speak more than words. He became increasingly reckless, almost showing a blatant disregard for his own safety, and this reckless approach almost cost him his life. On a lonely side road in the middle of nowhere close to sundown, Geralt encountered a broken cart and a man hiding beneath it. The said man, who was a merchant looking to save some time, ordered his servants to take a shortcut, but this proved to be a greedy choice. When one of the cartwheels on the cart broke down next to a ravine which stank of death, his servants quickly abandoned him, leaving him to his own devices as the sun was slowly approaching the horizon, and with the sun gone, the night is full of terrors and necrophages. But the good Samaritan he is, Geralt offered to share his mount with the merchant, but Urga was having none of it. "After all, that's a whole year's of work. I'd rather drop dead. I'm not leaving it," said the merchant. Upon hearing that, Geralt was ready to be on his way, but then the merchant uttered the magic words he had heard once before and regretted responding to them. "I will give you whatever you want, whatever you ask, please save me," pleaded the merchant, and Geralt, once again not content with his first attempt at playing Destiny, invoked the law of surprise for the second time. "You will give me whatever you came across at home upon your return but did not expect." And again, I can't be certain what possessed Geralt to yet again tamper with his fate after what happened the last time, but I suspect somewhere deep within, Geralt was tired. He has been traveling the path for a better part of a century, always alone and constantly being looked down on, and expected to stick out his neck over and over and over again for ungrateful peasants who first spit on him and then toss him a couple of coins for his blood and sweat. A few years ago, before this whole affair began, he would have never agreed to an impromptu contract like this, fighting an unknown number of necrophages without preparation and so close to their lair. Deep within, Geralt just wanted it to end, so he can finally rest for a while, but Destiny was having none of it. Night came, and so with it did the ghouls. Their number was great and they attacked Geralt from all sides, wounding him greatly, almost fatally, but he did his job. The monsters were dead, and for once Geralt was treated with respect and kindness Witchers usually don't experience. Jurga could have easily left the unconscious Witcher to bleed out and never make good on his promise, but he didn't. He recognized that behind the hostile exterior, this Witcher was a decent human being, however ironic that sounds. Came morning, Jurga hoisted Geralt on his cart and dressed his wounds, just in time for the cowardly servants to return from their shameful flight. From there, with the Witcher having swallowed his potions, they made their way towards the outskirts of Riverdale, on the banks of the Ponta River. Slowly but surely, thanks to equal parts his potions and the medical care Jurga acquired for him, Geralt was recovering from his wounds, and as they neared Jurga's homeland, the merchant informed the Witcher he was actually willing to keep his promise. Despite his wife's last pregnancy left her barren, Jurga offered the Witcher to take one of his sons instead, but Geralt refused, again proving that his earlier madness was only temporary. But what awaited for them at the merchant's home was nothing short of a miracle. Upon their arrival, after a heartwarming welcome Jurga received from his wife, she confessed that she took in an orphan, one of the children the druids rescued after the Black Swarm passed. The orphan was none other than Ciri, who at the sight of Geralt shouted his name, and for once Geralt let go and shouted back. Running to meet her, and in doing so he finally let go of his fear of what's to come, fear of the future and fear of the past, and the grudge he held, and accepted his destiny. But yeah, that was the last video in this 3-part series where I talk about Geralt of Rivia. I will be making a lot more Witcher lore videos, starting with the next one in which I will be talking about more general history of the world, starting with the conjunction of spears. But I also want to apologize for being very late on this video. It took me a week extra to make it, so this is probably the next Friday and not last Friday when I plan to upload it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. My name has been Soulfax, and I will see you, hopefully, next Friday.